Petri Wine brings you Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce in the new adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The Petri family, the family that took time to bring you good wine, invite you to spend the next half hour listening to Dr. Watson tell us another exciting adventure he shared with his old friend, that master detective, Sherlock Holmes. And I'd like to tell you about something you ought to share with your family before dinner. And that's Petri California Sherry. Because Petri Sherry can make that time before dinner a high spot in your day. That Petri Sherry is a truly fine wine. Its color is a deep amber, rich and inviting. And the wine is wonderfully smooth and full-bodied. Flavor, a swell. Honestly, I mean it when I say the best beginning a good meal ever had is a glass of Petri Sherry. Oh, and look, if some of your family like their sherry dry, not sweet, they'll really like Petri Pale Dry Sherry. So to be sure you please everyone, don't buy one, buy two. Buy the regular Petri Sherry and Petri Pale Dry Sherry. And be sure you look for those letters Petri, because they spell the proudest name in the history of American wines, Petri. And now I know our good friend Dr. Watson's expecting us. Let's go in and join him.
Come in.
Good evening, Doctor.
Good evening, Mr. Bartell.
Say, how are you feeling, Doctor? All over that attack of flu you had?
I'm feeling very much better, thank you, my boy. I'm still a little weak. We old fossils take much longer to get over that sort of thing than you young fellows.
Well, you take good care of yourself, Doctor. You've got a lot of friends, you know.
Oh, I'm very glad to hear that. Thank you, Mr. Bartell. And now settle yourself down, and I'll get on with tonight's new Sherlock Holmes adventure.
Where did it take place?
You may not be familiar with names of Jersey, Guernsey, Alderney, and Sark. But those are the four principal islands that make up the group known as the Channel Islands.
Oh, yes, Doctor, I have heard of them. Somewhere in the English Channel, aren't they? Between the southern coast of England and the northern coast of France?
That's quite right, my boy, though I very much doubt if you ever heard of the tiny island on which this story happened. It was the island of Garth, a minute but self-contained spot with a population of just under 1,000 inhabitants, subsisting, and from what I saw of the island in those days, subsisting very well on its dairy products.
Was it under the rule of the British government, Doctor?
No, Mr. Bartell, not exactly. You see, the island belonged to a family by the name of Horn. The head of the family, who was known as the Seigneur of Garth, was an independent ruler owing nominal allegiance to the King of England. That allegiance was expressed by one of those traditional ceremonies in which the Seigneur annually presented 1 pound of freshly churned butter to a representative of the British Crown.
Times haven't changed much, have they, Doctor? A pound of butter is still worth a king's ransom. But tell me, what were you and the great Sherlock Holmes doing on the island of Garth?
Well, I just coming to that, my boy, if you'll give me a minute. It was in the summer of 1896 when, to my utter amazement, Holmes informed me that we were going to the island of Garth as the official representatives of the British Crown to accept the annual presentation of butter. At the time, I must confess, I couldn't see why Holmes wanted to accept a ridiculous mission. It was only as we approached the island in a small fishing boat that he told me a great deal more was at stake than a pound of butter. Unfortunately, Mr. Bartell, I'm not much of a sailor, and as the wind was blowing hard and the sea racing, I'm afraid I wasn't a very intelligent companion.
Get up, Watson. We'll soon be there.
I hope so. I feel wretched, Holmes. I must say the whole trip seems utterly ridiculous to me. Plunging and bobbing about in a little boat in a raging torrent just because somebody wants to give somebody else a pound of butter.
Dear old Watson, you don't really think our mission is so innocuous, do you?
Then why are we going to the island of Garth?
We're going to the island of Garth at the express wish of its present ruler, Martha Horn.
Martha Horn? I never heard of her.
She's an extremely spirited old lady. And the only woman who dared tell a certain resident of Windsor Castle that she looked devilishly dowdy for an empress.
Great Scott, you mean that
Watson, that Martha Horn's behests are not lightly disregarded. Obviously, she wishes to see me urgently. Also, my brother Mycroft put pressure on me. He reminded me that a visit to Garth might be closely allied to this emerald tie pin I wear. Of course, you recall the origin of this pin.
Well, naturally. That lady at Windsor Castle gave it to you after our little trouble last year over those stolen plans for the Bruce Partington submarine.
Exactly, my dear fellow. But remember that the spy Oberstein had put those plans up for auction in all the naval centers of Europe. Some hint of their nature must have leaked out. It's even possible that other powers may be able by now to duplicate the pride of our submarine fleet. And whoever controls the channel, Watson, controls England.
Well, they're dropping anchor, and yet we're still a quarter of a mile out from the island. Why do you think they're doing that?
Here comes the skipper. He'll tell us.
Here is as close to the island as we may approach, monsieur. We have already sent signals. A smaller boat is putting out for you. It will be here in a little while.
Thank you.
A smaller boat. Good Lord. Holmes, you were hinting at the naval significance of the island of Garth.
Yes, old chap, I was.
Well, what good would it be as a port if even a small boat like this can only come within half a mile of it?
For a surface vessel, no. But we were speaking of submarines. Garth, I learned from the encyclopedia, boasts a magnificent interior cavern accessible only through underwater channels.
Great Scott, an ideal natural harbor and dry dock for a submarine fleet.
Precisely. And on the control of the island of Garth, Watson, may well rest the favored British Isles. Now, old chap, perhaps you see why Mycroft was so anxious for us to collect a pound of butter.
Holmes, doesn't it seem wonderful to be on land again? First the suspicious smack, and then that little rainboat. Then the bucket swinging us up the face of the cliff. Now at last I can stretch my legs.
Steady, old chap, steady, steady. Let me give you a hand. You'll soon get your land legs back again.
Thank you. I'm a bit shaky, I must confess. Hello? Who's that couple walking towards us?
Our welcoming committee, no doubt. How do you do?
Mr. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. Permit me to present myself. I am Dr. Hugo Oberwald.
How do you do, sir?
How do you do, Doctor?
And this is Mrs. Reeves, the housekeeper at Hort Castle, where you will be staying.
How do you do?
How do you do, Mrs. Reeves?
Welcome to the island of Garth, gentlemen.
We were deputed to come and greet you and take you back to the castle. We can walk there across the cliff tops. It isn't very far.
Splendid. I think my friend will appreciate traveling on terra firma once again.
Dear me, Herr Doctor, you are not a good sailor, perhaps?
No, perhaps about it, sir. I had a miserable crossing.
I am sorry to hear it. I trust your short stay at the castle will be some recompense for the journey.
The formal presentation of the butter will take place tonight. There will be no reason why you gentlemen cannot return to the mainland tomorrow.
Oh, thank you, Mrs. Reeves, but it's more than likely that we shall stay on for a few days.
Oh, it will be quite unnecessary.
I'm afraid that is a matter for Mrs. Horn and ourselves to decide.
I'm afraid that Mrs. Horn is incapable of making any further decisions.
Oh, what do you mean, madam?
Obviously, you have not heard, but the news is slow in reaching the mainland. Mrs. Horn died yesterday.
Died?
Good Lord, a natural death, I suppose.
But, of course,
I attended her myself, a simple case of heart failure.
the poor lady died in her sleep.
Shall we begin our walk to the castle?
By Jove, Holmes, this changes things. You suppose it was a natural death?
I suppose nothing, old fellow. But in almost 20 years of practice, I can recall precisely 3 clients, actual or potential, who died natural deaths. Come on, let's follow them.
Mr. Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson, this is Mr. Christopher Horn, grandson of Mrs. Horn and the new ruler of Garth.
How do you do?
Hello.
How do you do, sir?
So nice of you fellows to come over here. Too bad you had to arrive just as the poor old gal kicked the bucket, though.
Allow me to offer my condolences on your grandmother's death, sir.
Yes, yes, indeed, Mr. Horn.
Thank you. It was a ghastly business. I found her, you know.
Christopher.
Frightful sight. There was an awful silly grin on the old dear's face, and...
Don't you think it would be more to the point if you were to explain the ceremony in connection with tonight's presentation?
Oh, you're right, Reeve. Reeve is a terrible tyrant, but she is efficient. Don't know what I'd do without her. Always ran everything for poor old Granny. Why, when the old girl was ill, she...
Christopher, I gave you a schedule of the ceremonies this morning. What did you do with it?
Dash it, Reeve, I don't know. Must have lost it.
And I have my own copy in the study.
I swear I don't know what I'd do without you.
Excuse us a moment, gentlemen.
I'll be back in a jiffy.
Holmes, what in thunder's going on here? That boy's completely under the thumb of Mrs. Reeves. He was trying to tell us something, but that frightful woman kept changing the subject.
He spoke of an awful, silly grin on the dead woman's face. Didn't that suggest something to you?
By Jove, that's one of the characteristic symptoms of strychnine poisoning.
Exactly, old fellow. And perhaps he was going on to mention the equally characteristic arching of the body. We've got to get Mr. Horn to ourselves for a little while, and you've got to examine the body of the dead woman. And it's going to be difficult. Is that a balcony outside the window? Yes, it is. Come along. Let's see what it leads to.
The balcony seems to lead right round this particular wing of the castle. Must have served as a lookout in the olden days. I wish the balcony were a little wider. Must be a sheer drop of a couple of 100 feet down to the rocks below.
Yeah. Hello. These must be the windows of the room adjoining the one we just came out of. Let's go a little closer, shall we? We may be able to find out something.
Can you see anything?
Yes. They're in there. Mrs. Reeves and the boy. She's leaving the room. Now's our opportunity. I'll tap on the window.
He's seen it. He's coming to open it.
What are you two doing out there? Admiring the view?
Yes, my boy. It's quite beautiful.
Mr. Horn.
Yes, Mr. Holmes.
I was a great admirer of your grandmother. I was interested in what you were telling me of her death. She had a grin on her face, you said.
Yes, it was awful. Her body was all hunched up like a croquet hoop.
Really?
Of course, Dr. Oberval said it was perfectly all right, but I must say it seemed dashed on to me.
Yes, it was far from all right, I assure you.
And you started to say something else. What was it? Let me see. You said, when she was ill...
Oh, yes, that was a silly business. When she was ill, she thought she was in danger from poisoning, so she made Mrs. Reeves taste all her food and drink.
Did she really? Where is your grandmother's body now?
In the West Wing. The funeral's to be tomorrow morning.
I see. Where did Mrs. Reeves go?
I'm here on the balcony behind you, gentlemen, listening to your conversation with the greatest interest. Christopher, let me warn you. These men are the emissaries of the British government. They would stop at nothing to take the island over. These men are trying to influence you against me, against Reevy, who has looked after you ever since you were born, and who tries to protect you now that your grandmother has gone and you are alone.
Yes, I know, Reevy, but after all...
That is your pride as the head of the Horn family, the Seigneur of Garth. The Garth that I'm trying to save for you. This man is completely unscrupulous. He was about to accuse me of murder. Weren't you, Mr. Sherlock Holmes?
The thought had occurred to me, Mrs. Reeves.
Of course it had, because you wished to poison Christopher's mind against me. Well, Mr. Holmes, we have no police on the island of Garth. Our only law is the word of the Seigneur, and Christopher now holds that title. Seigneur, what do you say? Will you allow an Englishman to blind you by accusing me of being a murderess?
Mr. Holmes? Dr. Watson? I shall meet you at the ceremony tonight. Beyond that, I don't care to see you again. Good day.
A shame to spoil your plans, isn't it, Mr. Holmes?
Well, upon my soul.
Magnificent, Watson. Magnificent. A murderess who seeks to defeat me by accusing herself. Superb. It's a new game, my dear fellow, and one that must be played to a finish.
We'll hear the rest of Dr. Watson's story in just a second, so I'm just going to remind you that right now is one time you'd really enjoy a glass of Petri California Port. You couldn't ask for a more delicious wine. Petri Port, with its deep, rich red color and its heart-of-the-grape flavor, is one of America's all-time favorite wines. Petri Port is wonderful after dinner and perfect to serve when company comes. Try it. But just remember that when you want the kind of port I'm talking about, you've got to make sure it's Petri Port, because all Petri wines are good wines. Dr. Watson, this is certainly an unusual story you're telling us tonight. What happened after Mrs. Reeves left you and Sherlock Holmes standing on the balcony?
We retired to our rooms and had a quiet and lonely lunch. Though the great man said little, I could see that he was deeply excited and that his keen brain was evolving some plan that would enable us to solve the mystery of Mrs. Horn's death. After lunch, we started to descend the stairs leading to the main hall of Garth Castle. As we did so, Holmes said...
Watson, We're in no danger ourselves. Mrs. Reeves knows that we're here as emissaries of the British government.
Yes, and if we didn't return with the butter within a few days, there'd be a British dreadnought here looking for us.
However, I am in danger of one of my worst defeats. My professional pride is piqued. If only I could... Watson.
Yes, Holmes?
If at any time today I slip you a note, don't read it at once, but... Here comes Mrs. Reeves. Precisely, Watson. I entirely agree. If I do not make the test on Mrs. Horn's body within 24 hours of her death, it will be useless. I must make it by 3 o'clock this afternoon.
Mr. Holmes.
Oh, yes, Mrs. Reeves.
I want to apologize for my behavior before lunch. I was intolerably rude.
Oh, please, no.
Whatever my quarrels may be with British politics, I at least owe to both of you the duties of hospitality.
That's very gracious of you, Mrs. Reeves. I wonder, would your hospitality also include a personally conducted tour of the subterranean caverns for which this island has become internationally famous?
Would they really interest
Well, I'm afraid that my friend and I won't have the time.
Oh, yes, not at all, Watson, not at all. We have plenty of time. As long as we're back here by 3 o'clock.
I'm sure Dr. Oberwald would be delighted to join us. He has made quite a study of the unique rock formation.
Oh, that's splendid. It should prove a most interesting excursion.
But, Holmes, why do we want to go stomping around a lot of damp and smelly kegs?
Well, the exercise will do us good, old fellow. Will you lead the way, Mrs. Reeves? And please remember that it's most important that I return here...
I remember, Mr. Holmes. You must be back here by 3 o'clock. Mr. Holmes, and we shall reach the giant cavern.
Most interesting. Watson and Dr. Oberwald seem to have lagged behind us somewhat.
They will be here in a moment. There. This is the giant cavern.
Magnificent. Truly a miracle of nature. It's a natural submarine dry dock hewn out of the rocks.
Yes, Mr. Holmes. And in the olden days, only the smugglers who inhabited this island knew the entrance that leads to this cave. The first tenure of Garth found a cache of untold wealth hidden here.
Simply.
Silks, jewels. There are still the remains of some of the finest Calvados brandy stored among these rocks.
Indeed. An incomparable drink.
Would you care for some? It is our custom whenever visitors honor us with their presence to offer them a glass.
I should be delighted.
There is a natural shelf here in the rock. Perfect hiding place. Here you are, Mr. Holmes. And here is a glass.
This is a rare privilege. I imagine that very few people have been offered it.
Only our most distinguished visitors, I assure you.
This cavern is completely inaccessible from the outer sea, I presume.
Completely. Unless, of course, ships could swim under the sea.
Which, as you know as well as I, they can, Mrs. Reeves. Even outside the imaginings of Jules Verne.
Indeed. Would you care to explore a little deeper? The others will be with us soon.
Dr. Oberwald, the others seem to be some way ahead of us.
Yes, they do, don't they, Doctor?
Holmes! Holmes! Where are you?
Dear me, I'm afraid we cannot follow them.
Huh? What do you mean?
The next cavern is already cut off by the rising tide.
Great Scott, you mean that they're cut off?
I am afraid so. But do not worry here, Doctor. In a few hours, the tide will recede. They are in no danger. Just, shall I say, temporarily marooned.
I'm getting confoundedly sleepy.
I'm so sorry. I'm afraid that we stayed here longer than I intended. I fear that we are cut off by the tide.
Cut off? By the tides?
We're in no danger. In a few hours, we shall be able to return. But I'm afraid I cannot get you back at 3 o'clock, which was the time I promised.
But it's vital. That's absolutely vital that I get back. I'm so sleepy. But please keep talking. I must keep awake.
But, Dr. Oberhold, I must get to Sherlock Holmes at once.
I am sorry, Herr Doctor, but we are not able to control the forces of nature. We cannot force the water to recede. Your friend is in no danger.
No, but he's got a most important test that he must make by 3 o'clock.
I am afraid that will be impossible.
I've got to do something. I should have come to these blasted caves in the first place. I don't know what on earth I ought to do. By Jove, that note that Holmes gave me, he told me to open it if... where did I put it? Ah, here it is.
A note from Mr. Sherlock Holmes, eh?
Vital to make medical test. Great Scott, Dr. Overrule, it's absolutely necessary for me to turn to the castle at once.
Indeed. A note from Mr. Sherlock Holmes, and now it is most important that you return to the castle. No, my fine English friend. I am afraid I cannot allow you to.
Oh, I don't know how you propose to stop me, sir.
You see this revolver?
And do you see this stick?
I warn you, Herr Doctor.
Oh, no, you don't. I'm sorry you can't hear me, Dr. Overville, but when Sherlock Holmes gives me orders, I carry them out.
Mrs. Reeves, are we still trapped by the tide? Well, what time is it?
5 o'clock. I'm afraid that you will be a trifle late for your important appointment. What a pity.
You deliberately trapped me here. You drugged the brandy and kept me a prisoner.
Did I? Now, why should I do that, Mr. Holmes?
Because your greed of power. That's obvious in your domination of that pleasant though weak young man who is now Senor of Garth. I'm sure your beliefs would find forth in certain ideologies now arising in Germany. Your choice of a German doctor as an accomplice in your plans would support that theory.
And what might my plans be?
I suspect you're determined to give Garth as a submarine base to Germany. With this island in their power, they could control the channel.
Very interesting. And I suppose, as well as being a spy, I'm responsible for Mrs. Horn's murder?
You and Dr. Oberwald between you? She was too strong for you. You had to get her out of the way. You probably made subtle attempts on her life at first, the origin of which you did not realize, but which caused her eventually to send for me. My arrival forced your hand, and so you and Dr. Oberwald resorted to the quite unsubtle expedient of poisoning her.
All pure supposition, Mr. Holmes. The only law on this island is Christopher Horn. Do you suppose he'll believe you?
No, I suppose he won't. You've outwitted me, Mrs. Reeves. I walked into your trap just as you intended me to.
Then in that case, you may collect your pound of butter tonight and return to the mainland tomorrow.
Mrs. Reeves, how much longer do we have to wait for the tide before we can make our way back to the castle?
We can leave now. We could have left at any time. There's another secret entrance that is above the tide level. I merely had to make you overstay the hour of your test. I could not risk Christopher's seeing definite proof. Come now. I shall lead you back. You fool.
Holmes, where have you been all this time?
Mind that, Watson. Did you open the note?
Yes?
Followed my instructions?
Yes, it was, as you suspected.
Thank heaven, old chap. Then now we can hoist her with her own petard. Here she comes.
I'm glad to see, gentlemen, that you have assembled here in the seigneur's room. The ceremony of presenting the butter traditionally takes place here. As soon as Christopher arrives, we will explain our customs in this matter. Dr. Watson, I trust that Herr Oberwald proved an interesting companion on your excursion this afternoon.
Yes, indeed, most interesting. We had a discussion of the relative merits of the walking stick versus the revolver. I think I was able to make my argument fairly convincing.
Where is Dr. Oberwald now?
I imagine he's lying down. He had all the symptoms of impending headache when I saw him last.
Why are you smiling, Mr. Holmes? What's been going on?
I'm afraid, Mrs. Reeves, that your plans have misfired rather badly. As soon as Mr. Horn arrives, I expect you will be under arrest for murder and high treason.
Christopher would never believe you.
Wouldn't I? Mrs. Reeves, you poisoned my grandmother.
Christopher, what lies have these men been telling you?
You're the one that's been telling me lies. I believed you when you said you'd been tasting the old lady's food. But when Dr. Watson showed me the results of his test this afternoon, it was as clear as daylight.
But the test could prove nothing after 24 hours had passed. You said so yourself, Mr. Holmes.
A deliberate lie, Mrs. Reeves. I'm afraid that I invented that mythical 24-hour test. I knew that as soon as I mentioned it, you would attempt to prevent my carrying it out. So I was delighted when you fell into my trap. You thought that you were shanghaiing me, whereas in reality I was shanghaiing you. My job is to prove your guilt to the senor. With your dominant presence away from the household, it was easy for Dr. Watson to make his test.
You devil. You knew all the time.
Of course I did. But I had to deceive you. I'm glad my performance was sufficiently convincing. By the way, Mrs. Reeves, the drugged brandy was dreadfully clumsy.
You didn't drink it home?
Why, of course I didn't. But it was very unflattering to me that Mrs. Reeves thought I might.
Mrs. Reeves, you realize what this means, don't you? I'm going to ask these gentlemen to take you and Dr. Oberwald back to the mainland with them tomorrow.
And stand trial in a British court? Never. I was born on the island of Garth. I have lived here all my life, and I shall die.
What are you up to? Stop it. She's going out on the balcony.
One day, Garth will belong to Germany. One day, the whole world will belong to Germany. Goodbye, you meddling fool. Goodbye.
Great Scott, she's gone. It must be a couple of 100 feet to the rocks below.
What a dreadful thing. I still can't believe she was a murderess and a traitor. Now, it's shocking.
A shabby finish to a shabby business. Mr. Horn, I suggest that we make sure Dr. Oberwald does not escape justice, and that we then perform the ritual presentation of the butter.
Yes, Mr. Holmes. The island of Garth will still pay tribute to England, and I think it always will.
Well, Doctor, that was some story. So Germany didn't get the island of Garth after all.
No, Mr. Bartell. In fact, in after years, the island proved to be an invaluable submarine base for England.
Say, what about the pound of butter? Did Holmes get it?
Oh, yes. But why are you so interested in the butter?
Are you kidding? In our house, butter is our second most favorite topic of conversation.
Your second most favorite? Well, what's your favorite topic of conversation?
Remember, you asked me. Petri wine.
Oh, as if I didn't know.
Doctor, that Petri wine is something to really talk about. You know, the Petri family has been making wine for generations. Why, the art of making fine wine is their heritage, handed down from father to son, from father to son. Believe me, when it comes to turning luscious, sun-ripened California grapes into fragrant, delicious wine, the Petri family really knows how. And they're proud of their wine, too. That's why the name Petri on a bottle of wine really means something. It's the personal assurance of the Petri family that every drop of that wine is good wine. It ought to be, because Petri took time to bring you good wine. Well, Dr. Watson, what new Sherlock Holmes adventure do you have lined up for us next week?
Next week, Mr. Bartell, I'm going to tell you a story that took place on the Sussex Downs many, many years ago. It concerns a young girl, a painter in watercolors, and a very wise old lady. I call it The Adventure of the Living Doll.
Tonight's Sherlock Holmes adventure was written by Dennis Green and Anthony Boucher and was suggested by an incident in the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle story, The Adventure of the Bruce Poddington Plan. Music is by Dean Fosler. Mr. Rathbone appears through the courtesy of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, and Mr. Bruce through the courtesy of Universal Pictures, where they are now starring in the Sherlock Holmes series. The Petri Wine Company of San Francisco, California, invites you to tune in again next week, same time, same station. Sherlock Holmes comes to you from our Hollywood studio. This is Harry Bartell saying goodnight for the Petri family. For a solid hour of exciting mystery dramas, listen every Monday on most of the same stations at 8 o'clock to Michael Shayne, followed immediately by Sherlock Holmes. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System. Petri Wine brings you Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce in the new adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The Petri family, the family that took time to bring you good wine, invite you to listen to Dr. Watson tell us another story about his old friend, that master detective, Sherlock Holmes. And incidentally, I'd like to tell you about a swell American custom. The custom of serving sherry wine just before dinner. Petri California sherry. You know, especially when you have guests, while you're waiting for that call to the dinner table, there's nothing better than a good glass of that good Petri sherry. You don't need fancy glasses for Petri sherry. No, sir. That wine tastes good out of any glass. And it looks good, too. Beautifully clear and the color of precious amber. Just try that Petri sherry and you'll feel like smacking your lips after every sip. Oh, and say, Petri makes two kinds of sherry. The regular sherry and Petri pale dry sherry. Just to make sure you get the perfect sherry for the whole family, don't buy one, buy two. But do be sure the sherry you buy is Petri sherry. Petri, the proudest name in the history of American wine. And now I'm sure our good friend Dr. Watson's ready for us. Let's go in and join him.
Ah, there you are, Mr. Bartell.
Good evening, Doctor. Say, where are the puppies this evening?
Mr. Bartell, don't you think it's about time you began to refer to them as the dogs? They're almost a year old, you know.
I stand corrected. Where are the dogs this evening?
Well, they had another furious battle with a dead seal on the beach today. My housekeeper, Mrs. West, is giving them a much-needed bath.
They certainly have an aversion to seals, don't they? Well, Doctor, are you all ready with tonight's new Sherlock Holmes adventure?
Yes, my boy, and as yesterday was St. Patrick's Day, I decided to tell you a story that took place in Ireland a few years before the turn of the century. I imagine that you've heard of kissing the Blarney stone, haven't you?
Oh, yes, Doctor, though I've never understood exactly what it meant.
Well, let me explain it to you, because the ceremony plays a very important part in the story tonight. Blarney Castle is an imposing 15th century ruin a few miles outside the town of Cork. The castle is many stories high, and in the foremost tower, the famous Blarney stone is situated.
What's supposed to be the point in kissing it, Doctor?
The stone is considered a powerful talisman, and the legend runs that whoever kisses it is endowed with eloquence for life.
Say, Doctor, if I ever get over to Ireland, I'll certainly kiss that stone. But you're such a storyteller yourself, Doctor. I bet you've kissed it, huh?
No, Mr. Bartell. I'm afraid I never had quite enough courage.
Courage? Ooh, why does it need courage, Doctor?
Well, because the Blarney stone is set in a most inaccessible position on the outside wall. To kiss it, it is customary to lower the candidate for eloquence over the rampart, head foremost, with a friend hanging on to his heels.
From the top of a castle? It does sound dangerous, Doctor.
It was, my boy, so much so that in recent years a great row of iron spikes was put round the parapet to prevent an accident. Though, of course, at the time tonight's story took place, there was no such guard.
And I have a feeling that an accident did take place, Doctor?
No, Mr. Bartell, let me tell you the story from the beginning. Sherlock Holmes and I were staying in the city of Cork, where the great man had just solved the singular affair which the local press had referred to as the Leprechaun murders. A few days before our departure for England, we paid a visit to Blarney Castle. I must confess that I had a certain desire to test the miraculous powers attributed to the Blarney stone. I very soon changed my mind, however, as Holmes and I stood there, high on the turrets of Blarney Castle, and watched a terrified initiate being hauled up by his ankles and yelling at the top of his voice. Pull me up! Pull me up quickly! I think I'm going to faint! Great Scott, I had no idea that kissing the Blarney stone was such a hazardous proceeding, huh?
Yes. It would seem that eloquence could be more easily obtained than by hanging suspended by one's ankles from a battlement with 100-foot drop below and kissing a piece of stone.
Oh, I'll never do that again. Oh, I'll never.
I must say, I don't blame the fellow.
And yet, my dear chap, on our way over here, you expressed a sneaking desire to kiss the stone yourself. I'll be very happy to hold your ankles if you want to try the experiment.
No, thank you. After witnessing the ceremony, I've changed my mind.
Then I suggest we make our way back downstairs. I don't think there's much more to be seen up here.
Very well. By the way, Holmes, do you know the origin of the superstition regarding the Blarney stone?
Yes, I do, old chap. The stone was, the story of the stone dates back to the middle of the 15th century. A certain Cormac McCarthy, called the Strong, a descendant of the ancient kings of Munster and builder of this castle, chanced one day to save an old woman from drowning. In her gratitude, she offered Cormac a golden tongue, which would have the power to influence men and women, friends and foes, as he willed. She told him to mount the battlement and kiss a certain stone in the wall 5 feet below the gallery running round the top. He followed her directions and obtained all the fluent persuasiveness she had promised.
And I suppose the story spread, and the Blarney stone has been a magnet to pilgrims ever since.
Yeah, a pleasant legend.
Holmes.
Yes, old chap?
Tomorrow's St. Patrick's Day. I bet there'll be quite a bit of excitement in the village tonight. Don't you think it'd be rather fun to pay a visit to one of the local inns?
Splendid idea, old chap. Our rather arduous work here in Ireland is concluded, and I think we're more than entitled to a little gaiety.
Charming, quite charming. A waiter and singing at his work.
Singing very well, too. Just the same, I wish someone would come and take our order.
Oh, there's a barmaid. I'll see if I can catch her eye. Hi. Miss.
Would you gentlemen be after wanting something?
Yes, my dear. My friend and I would like a little refreshment. And what would you suggest?
What would I suggest, Your Honor? Oh, begorra. There's but one drink a gentleman like yourself should be after pouring down you. And that's the cream of Connemara. Whiskey that'll soften your heart and make you glow with a good feeling so that the little people will be after visiting you.
It sounds delightful. Bring 2 glasses, will you?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. I must say I never heard an English barmaid go into such rhapsodies over a nip of whiskey.
No, the Irish are distinctly more colorful in their speech. It's an interesting fact, though, Watson, that the Irish are curiously unrewarding in the criminal world. England, Scotland, America, Australia have all produced classics of crime, but the Irish murders, almost without exception, have been purely physical, affairs of hot blood.
You say that rather regretfully, Holmes.
No, my dear chap, no. I say, Watson, look at this rather florid-looking gentleman coming towards our table.
It looks to me as if he's a little under the weather.
You fellas have got to have a drink with me.
Oh, thank you, sir, thank you, but we've just ordered one.
Well, you've got to have it with me. I went to the races at Cork today and made a killing. I'm going to buy all the drinks here tonight.
I'm afraid that...
Nothing to be afraid of. I'll sit down with you for a moment. My name's Hankin, Geoffrey Hankin. What's yours?
Mine is Holmes, and this is my friend, Dr. Watson.
How do you do,
sir? How do you do?
Your Honors, that'll be 1 and 6.
Here, I'm paying for these here. Half a crown, and you can keep the change.
Oh, blessings on you, Your Honor.
Oh, well, if you insist on paying for our drinks, Mr. Hankin, here's your very good health.
Yes, indeed.
You're both English, aren't you?
Yes, sir?
So am I, and it's certainly a relief to hear an English voice again.
Oh, you don't like the Irish lilt, sir?
Can't bear it.
Personally, I find it rather charming.
Yes, indeed, so do I.
Well, you wouldn't if you had to live with it all the time. Sometimes I think that if I hear one more Irish tenor singing Molly Malone or one more reference to the little people, I shall go raving mad.
You live in Ireland, sir?
Yeah, I have to. I own a half interest in the Tweed mill here, you see. In any case, my wife's Irish and she thinks there's no other country in the world, so I'm stuck here. See that couple sitting at the table over there?
You mean the fellow with the very beautiful girl?
Yes. The man's Michael Corcoran, my partner.
Oh, the girl's absolutely ravishing.
You'd like to meet her?
I'd like to, by George, yes. What do you say, Holmes?
Oh, very well, Watson. The combination of my natural curiosity and your taste for a pretty face would seem to suit the occasion admirably.
I might as well warn you, Doctor, that the pretty face belongs to my wife.
Your wife? Oh, good gracious me. I'm very sorry. I didn't mean to...
Oh, well, you better bring your glasses with you. Molly, my dear, I want you to meet 2 English friends of mine, Mr. Holmes and Dr. Watson.
How do you do?
How do you do, Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson? Won't you sit down and join us?
And this is my partner, Michael Corcoran.
How do you do, Mr. Corcoran?
How do you do, son?
I'm glad to meet you. Please be seated, gentlemen.
Are you visiting here in Cork?
Yes,
Holmes?
Mrs. Hankin, but we're returning to England in a few days.
You've been to Blarney Castle, I hope.
Oh, yes, we were there this afternoon.
And did either of you have the courage to kiss the Blarney Stone?
No, we didn't. I'm afraid it's an athletic feat that's beyond me.
It's a lot of rubbish, that's what it is. Kissing a slab of stone.
Have you the courage to do it, Geoffrey?
Well, of course I have, but I don't want to make a fool of myself. Where's the barmaid? Kathleen.
I'll make a wager, Geoffrey, that you haven't the courage to kiss the stone.
How much will you bet, Michael?
I'll wager a 10-pound note on it.
It's a bet, and you fellas witnessed it. I'll kiss the Blarney Stone at noon tomorrow, and you'll be 10 pounds the poorer, Michael. And I suggest that Mr. Holmes and Dr. Watson be present as well. They can act as referees.
Geoffrey, dear, don't get so excited.
Well, I don't like it when Michael suggests I don't have courage.
You want some more drink, Mr. Henkin?
Yes, all of us want some.
No more for me, thank you, Mr.
No more for
And
me,
I
thank you.
think you've had enough, Geoffrey.
Don't tell me when I've had enough, Molly.
In Dublin's fair city, the girl...
Oh, no, not that filthy song. Yes.
Firstly, Mr. Hankin, I find the traditional Irish melodies quite beautiful.
And I find them revolting.
Stop! Geoffrey, quiet.
Would Your Honor be wanting me to sing another song?
My honor would like you to shut up that filthy caterwaul.
Really, sir, really. I call that
Geoffrey.
my...
Sean, please go on with your singing.
In Dublin's fair city...
You heard me, you great bog-trotting gaffoon. I said shut up, and I meant shut up!
Geoffrey, I'm leaving here at once. Michael, please to take me home.
It'll be my pleasure, Molly.
You're an ugly man, Mr. Henkin. Knocking down poor Sean when he was singing just like a bird.
Oh, the devil with him, and all of you.
No Irishman will be after forgiving you for this night's work. No, not the little people of old Ireland either. You've made more enemies, Mr. Henkin, than you'll ever see. But you'll be knowing they're there.
Fiddlesticks, you can't frighten me with your stupid Irish superstition.
Well, bless my soul, that was a charming little party, I must say.
Englishmen like Hankin are a disgrace to their country. Fortunately, they're not representative, though.
Yes, I must say I'd hate to have a curse put on me like that barmaid laid on him.
Watson,
Yes?
did you see the glances which Mr. Hankin's partner and his wife exchanged as the brawl started? There was more menace to him in those glances than in all the threats of all the little people in Ireland.
Yes. I thought that there was something between them. I say, Holmes, that bet about Hankin kissing the Blarney stone at noon tomorrow, do you suppose...
I suppose nothing, old fellow. But there are forces at work here that I don't like. I think, Watson, that you and I will be at the Blarney stone at noon tomorrow. It's possible that the bet made tonight is all part of a definite plan, and I have a feeling that the bet is still on. Quite windy up here today, old fellow, at the top of the tower, isn't it?
Yes, it's just past noon. I wonder if that man Hankin is going to keep to the terms of his bet.
We shall soon learn. In the meanwhile, are you sure that you wouldn't like to change your mind and kiss the Blarney stone yourself?
I'm quite sure, thank you. Ah, here they come now.
Yes. Hankin and his partner, Mr. Corcoran. The bet is on, Watson. Good day to you, gentlemen.
Oh, hello. It's my friends from last night.
Well, I see you're going through with the bet, son.
Oh, yes. Jeffrey set his mind on the 10 pounds of mine.
Your wife didn't accompany you, Mr. Hankin?
No, she didn't. I'm afraid I'm rather in disgrace for my behavior last night. Molly made me go round and see that waiter fellow that I hit. I offered him money, but he wouldn't take it.
Did you offer him an apology?
Apologize? To a waiter? I should say not. Well, come on, let's get this stupid farce over with.
Are you sure your nerves can stand it, Jeffrey? There's a drop of 100 feet or more below you.
Oh, don't worry about me, Michael. Just hold on to my ankles tightly and don't let go. I'll climb onto the parapet. There we are. Now hold on to my feet, Michael, and lower me gently.
I'm holding you, Jeffrey.
Then lower away.
Right you are, Jeffrey.
Great Scott, I wouldn't do that for 100 pounds. Sliding head first down a vertical wall.
That's enough, Michael. I can reach the stone.
Oh, his boots. They're slipping through my fingers. I can't hold him.
Let me help you.
I'm slipping. Pull me.
Hold on to him. Hold on to him.
Oh, he's gone. I just couldn't hold him.
Great heavens. No man could survive that drop.
Mr. Corcoran, you deliberately let your partner slip to his death. This is murder.
But I don't understand. I'm a strong man. But he just vanished out of my hands like a greased pig.
Let me see your hands, Mr. Corcoran.
This is dreadful. Dreadful.
There's grease on your hands. Grease. And with a faint trace of boot blacking.
Good Lord, Holmes, that
It means,
that...
Watson, that someone, knowing that Hankin was going to kiss the Blarney stone, smeared his boots with grease so that he would slip out of the grasp of whoever was holding him. As clever a method of indirect long-distance murder as ever I've encountered.
You'll hear the remainder of Dr. Watson's story in just a second, so I'm going to remind you that Petri California Sherry is not only wonderful before dinner, but it's good almost any time. If you had to choose just one wine for almost any occasion, that wine would be Petri Sherry. Petri Sherry is a perfect wine to serve in the afternoon or in the evening. It's good before dinner, yes, but it's swell after dinner, too. In fact, with a bottle of Petri Sherry on your shelf, you've got practically a small-sized wine cellar. So get a bottle of Petri Sherry soon. And remember, you can't miss with any wine that has the letters Petri on the label, because all Petri wine is good wine. Well, Dr. Watson, this is quite a story you're telling us tonight. What happened next? I suppose you went down into the castle grounds and looked for the dead man's body?
Well, we tried to, Mr. Bartell, but the authorities were curiously uncooperative. They refused to let us search, insisting that the police be called first. And so, Mr. Bartell, half an hour after the tragedy, Holmes and I found ourselves standing in a tiny police station as we told the story to the local sergeant.
Sure the saints be praised, Mr. Holmes. 'Tis a terrible story you've told me. Tomorrow I'll be after arresting Sean O'Flaherty.
Sean O'Flaherty? He's the waiter at the inn, the one who sings.
That he is, and he sings like a breath of spring. I'll be sorry to see him hanged.
But you've got no proof that he was responsible for the murder?
Proof, you say, sir? Well, I can't arrest a big manufacturing man like Mr. Cochran, can I? Or a fine lady like Mrs. Hankin.
But you can't arrest a man without any evidence of guilt.
Oh, I can't I? Then supposing I tell you that Sean O'Flaherty cleans the boots at the hotel where Mr. Hankin was
He
staying.
does, eh? Then he had the perfect opportunity for the greasing of Hankins' boots this morning. And we know he had a motive for harming him.
You're right, sir. And for what I have heard of the dead man's behavior last night, half a dozen people could have heard him make the bet that he'd kiss the Blarney stone today. Sean O'Flaherty's our man. I'll have to arrest him tomorrow.
Tomorrow? But good heavens, man, aren't you going to do something today? A murderer's at large.
Today is blessed St. Patrick's Day. Oh, I should let the poor fellow have the day in peace. Oh, he won't run away.
But my dear son, will you come back with me to the castle and search for the body? They refuse to let me do it alone.
On St. Patrick's Day? That I will not. We would need a crew of helpers, and where will I be after getting them on blessed St. Patrick's Day? No, we'll do that tomorrow, too. No, today's a day for celebration.
Oh, your methods astound me, Sergeant.
Do they now, sir? Don't be after fretting about me. Just enjoy yourself today. Tomorrow we'll see what can be done about it. Well, good day to you, gentlemen.
Oh, bless my soul. I've never seen such a happy-go-lucky policeman in my life.
It's infuriating. If only I were allowed to examine Hankins' body, I could get to the bottom of this.
Well, what are you going to do now, Holmes?
The police won't help us. Then we must take the law into our own hands. I think we'll start off by going to the hotel and seeing what we can find out from Sean O'Flaherty.
I was going to Blarney a day, I well remember, for to view the lads and lasses on the 5th day of November with a ring do a day and a ring do a daddy. Oh, your honors would be after speaking to me, Sean O'Flaherty, perhaps.
Yes, Sean. Did you know that Mr. Hankin, the man who struck you last night, was dead?
Dead? Well, if ever a man deserved to be beneath the sod, 'twas Geoffrey Hankin himself. A mean, ugly man. The saints be praised that he's gone. How did he die, sir?
He was murdered.
Murdered? Well, but, Dad, I'm not surprised to hear it. Who murdered him, sir?
At the moment, the police seem to think that you are the culprit.
Myself? Well, how would I be after murdering the man, sir, when I don't even know how he died?
He died when he fell from the top of Blarney Castle as he was trying to kiss the stone.
He fell because Mr. Cochran, his partner, couldn't hold on to his feet. His boots had been greased.
And we know that you have been cleaning his boots, Sean.
That I have, sir. I cleaned them this very morning. But I put no grease on them, if that's what you'd be after suggesting.
I'm suggesting nothing. I'm trying to establish a few facts. Do you know Kathleen, the barmaid?
Oh, and why shouldn't I know her, sir? She's to be me wife before the winter sets in.
She pronounced a curse on the dead man last night, just after he had knocked you down. It's possible that she met...
Here she comes now.
Sean, my darling, what are the fine gentlemen doing here?
Oh, Kathleen. They've come to ask me questions about the death of Mr. Hankin. He fell off Blarney Castle today and got himself murdered, they say.
The saints be praised. But what has that to do with you, my darling?
Well, the gentlemen tell me that the village police think that I might have greased his boots so that he slipped to his death.
The village police is as stupid as my father's big sow. If Mr. Hankin fell to his death today because his boots were greased, I can tell you who did it.
Indeed, who?
The little people. I warned Mr. Hankin last night that the little people would be after him. He insulted the Irish.
Oh, come, my dear. You don't seriously expect us to believe in the little people?
And why not, Your Honor? We have them here. There's those who say the fairies all be dead, but I know different. I've seen them. When I was a slip of a girl, close to where I lived, there was a rat. That's a fort, you know. And the rat was a fairy's fort. We never dared touch it with a spade or cut down a tree growing on it or carry away a stone. We'd put our ear to the ground at night and we could hear the fairy music rising up from under the ground. Ah, they're gentle people. Most of the time. But they'd grease the boots of a man like Mr. Hankin if they didn't like them. That they would, Your Honor.
Holmes, I'm certain that we're wasting our time here.
I feel so, Watson. You get the whole thing turned on the greasing of those boots. If only I could have the boots in my hands. If only I could make laboratory tests. But until that dolt of a police... But of course! I have it, Watson.
You have what, Holmes?
The answer, I hope. Get hold of Mrs. Hankin and Mr. Cochran. Have them meet me in the Blarney Stone Tower in half an hour.
And you, where are you going?
To the police station to try and convince the sergeant that even though it's St. Patrick's Day, it's his duty to help me trap a murderer.
You know, Mr. Holmes, you're an obstinate man. It's blessed St. Patrick's Day, and yet you insist that we meet here on the top of Blarney Castle. What do you think you can prove?
Who murdered Geoffrey Hankin?
Bess, but why do Molly and I have to be here?
Yes, Mr. Holmes. And poor Geoffrey's body still lying somewhere below us.
Mrs. Hankin, Mr. Corcoran. I asked Dr. Watson to bring you here for a good reason, I assure you. You ready, Watson?
Quite ready, Holmes.
Good. Sergeant.
Yes, sir.
You asked me why I've assembled the three of you here. I'm going to reconstruct the crime. I shall play the part of the victim. My friend Dr. Watson will represent you, Mr. Corcoran. Now, I straddle the parapet. So. Watson, hold on to my feet, will you?
I've got him, Holmes.
And lower me down the face of the wall.
Right, sure. Holmes, hold tight to the wall. Try and push yourself back. The murderer's tried to get you. Your boots are covered in grease.
Stand back. Come away. Grab my trouser legs, Watson.
I've got him, Holmes. Come, up you come. There we go. Oh, Joe, that was a near thing.
Devilish plot, Sergeant, and very cleverly carried out. My boots were ungreased when I entered the castle, and yet someone has been able to apply grease to them without my knowledge within the last few minutes.
Sure, and how is that possible, sir?
I don't know, Sergeant, I must confess.
Holmes, you stumbled as you came up the darkened staircase. Do you remember that?
That's all, chap, I'd forgotten. And you, Mrs. Hankin, and you, Mr. Corcoran, were kind enough to assist me to my feet. An excellent opportunity to apply the grease. Now we know that one of you two is the murderer. I must have a jar of grease somewhere. Sergeant, will you search the lady while I search Mr. Corcoran?
But this is ridiculous.
Of course it is. How could we be guilty?
Well, if you're not guilty, you've got no objection to being searched, madam.
Well, upon my word, here in your purse, Mrs. Hankin, is a jar of grease.
What?
Now, what have you to say for yourself?
What can't you say, Sergeant? Except that she engineered her husband's murder and tried to engineer mine.
Oh, no, I knew nothing about Geoffrey's murder. Oh, Michael, darling, I swear to you.
Don't worry, my darling. I'll not let them hurt you. I'm telling you, you're wrong, Mr. Holmes. I was the murderer.
Oh, no, Michael. You mustn't sacrifice yourself for
I
me.
think this little play acting has gone far enough. Mr. Corcoran, you have just offered us what you think we will accept as a false confession. But I've established the one thing I wish to know, that you love your late partner's wife and she you.
I'm proud to admit that, Mr. Holmes. And now that she's a widow, I can say it in the open. But what are you implying?
That you murdered your partner.
But the grease on your own boot, sir. I just found a jar of it in Mrs. Hankin's handbag.
Oh, that, my dear Sergeant, was all part of my little plan. As to the grease on my boots, I confess I placed it there myself, just as I planted the jar of grease in your bag, Mrs.
But why, Holmes?
A fraud accomplished two ends. It forced you, Mr. Corcoran, into a betrayal of your love. But what was more important, it proved from what Dr. Watson's natural reactions were that a man holding the greased boots could not fail to realize that fact at once. You brazenly committed murder before our very eyes, Mr. Corcoran, hoping to appear as an innocent victim of another's plot.
Your theory is an ingenious one, Mr. Holmes, but how can you prove it? I can claim that my hands are unusually insensitive, not the delicate fingers of a doctor like your friend.
Yes, he's right, sir. How can you prove it?
When, with your kind cooperation, Sergeant, we find the body of Mr. Hankin and examine it, I shall study his boots. If the grease was applied at the hotel, as it would have been if Sean O'Flaherty had done it, the boots will reveal dust from the walk here. If there is no dust, the grease must have been applied as you grasped your partner's boots with grease-smeared hands, Mr. Corcoran. You should know best what my tests will
Grab
reveal.
him, Sergeant. Grab him. He's
Come back
headed
here.
for that
Come back
parapet.
Oh, Michael, don't! Please don't!
Goodbye, Molly, me darling.
No!
Great Scotty. He jumped off the parapet.
Now, Mr. Holmes, you can see that I was right, sir. Wasn't I?
What do you mean, Sergeant?
In waiting until tomorrow to get the search party. Now we can be after finding both bodies at the one time.
Well, Doctor, that was really an unusual story.
Even now I get a bit of a shudder when I think of that afternoon at the castle.
I don't blame you. Doctor, you know something? Earlier this evening, I said that if I ever got to Ireland, I'd certainly want to kiss the Blarney stone, remember?
Yeah?
Well, I've changed my mind. I'd no more want to hang by my heels to kiss that stone than, well, just let's forget.
But, my boy, don't forget, if you kiss that stone, you get the gift of eloquence. You'd be the most convincing fellow in the world.
So?
So, well, whenever you talked about Petri wine, you would really do people a favor because they wouldn't be able to resist trying it.
Oh, talking about Petri wine isn't important, Doctor. The best way to determine just how good Petri wine really is to taste it. One sip and there's all the proof you need. That's because the Petri family has developed the art of winemaking to a truly fine point. They've been making wine for generations. And all of the things the Petri family knows about turning luscious, sun-ripened grapes into fragrant, delicious wine have been handed on down in the family from father to son, from father to son. That's why whenever you want a swell wine, for any occasion, you can't go wrong with a Petri wine, because Petri took time to bring you good wine. Well, Dr. Watson, what new Sherlock Holmes story are you planning to tell us next week?
Well, now, let me see. Next week, Mr. Bartell, I'm going to tell you a story in which that arch-criminal Professor Moriarty played a most important part. It deals with the theft of a famous painting, of a strange night that Sherlock Holmes and I spent trapped in the interior of a giant metal vault, and of mysterious bloodstains in an empty room.
Tonight's Sherlock Holmes adventure was written by Dennis Green and Anthony Boucher and was suggested by an incident in the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle story, A Case of Identity. Music is by Dean Fossler. Mr. Rathbone appears through the courtesy of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, and Mr. Bruce through the courtesy of Universal Pictures, where they are now starring in the Sherlock Holmes series. The Petri Wine Company of San Francisco, California, invites you to tune in again next week, same time, same station. Sherlock Holmes comes to you from our Hollywood studio. This is Harry Bartell saying goodnight for the Petri family. For a solid hour of exciting mystery dramas, listen every Monday on most of these same stations at 8 o'clock to Bulldog Drummond, followed immediately by Sherlock Holmes. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System.